Hello everybody and welcome to my training video on prompts and the prompt hierarchy. So before we get started, I want to go over the objectives of this training. So first we're going to define the term prompt, and then we're going to discuss why prompts are useful and important, and then we're going to define and discuss the 6 types of prompts from the most to least intrusive, and then we're going to view and briefly discuss the prompt hierarchy. And lastly, we're going to discuss how to prompt using the least to most and most to least prompting methods, and then we'll wrap things up. So first things first, what is a prompt? So a prompt is anything we do to increase the likelihood that a person will engage in a desired behavior that is not yet learned. And more or less, it's a hint to help someone learn a new skill that is not known. So in order to be considered a prompt must be simultaneously done while providing like a teaching instruction, and it must be presented before the learner performs and attempts the skill. And lastly, it must be systematically faded over time in order to increase skill independence. Now, why do we use prompts? So we use prompts because they make learning a skill easier and less frustrating for the learner. And we also use them because they show the person learning the skill what is expected of them. And they also support the successful development of language, communication, and social interaction skills of the learner. And lastly, they are an evidence-based strategy to support children with autism and other developmental disabilities by developing their language, communication, and social interaction skills. So let's talk about these 6 types of prompts now. And as I said in the objectives, I'm going to start with the most intrusive prompt, which is the full physical prompt. And as I move on, they will progressively get less intrusive. So the first type of prompt is the full physical prompt. So a full physical prompt is providing hand-over-hand assistance to the learner so they can perform the skill correctly. So to give an example, if you look at the picture in the upper right corner, you'll see a teacher giving a full physical prompt to the learner to perhaps teach them how to write their name or to draw a square or a circle. So a full physical prompt is providing hand-over-hand assistance, just as you see in the picture in the upper right corner. So a partial physical prompt, on the other hand, is guiding the learner's forearm, elbow, or shoulder so they can perform the skill correctly. Now, if you look at the picture in the bottom right corner, you'll see a teacher holding the learner's elbow to do the same thing, to teach them how to perhaps write their name or to draw a circle. So that's a partial physical prompt. It can involve holding the forearm, the elbow, or the shoulder to get them to perform a skill correctly. The next type of prompt is called a model prompt. So a model prompt involves acting out a skill to show the client how to do it. So an example of a model prompt would be showing a learner how you draw a circle first before telling them to give it a try. So more or less, it's showing them how to do the skill and then having them copy you. The next type of prompt is called a gesture prompt, which involves pointing to, looking at, motioning, or nodding to indicate to the learner what the correct answer is or how to perform the skill. So an example of a gesture prompt would be making a circular motion on a piece of paper using your pointer finger to show the learner how to draw a circle. So now let's move on to a verbal prompt. So a verbal prompt is words, instructions, or questions that direct a learner to say an answer or engage in the skill. So an example of a verbal prompt would be explaining to a learner like how to draw a circle. So the way I would explain how to draw a circle would be to start, in one spot and then move the pencil in a circular motion. And that's how you draw a circle. The last type of prompt is called a visual prompt, which is a picture, video, drawing, or cue that gives information about the correct answer or how to perform a skill correctly to the learner. So an example of a visual prompt would be showing a learner a video of a person drawing a circle before telling them to draw a circle. So now that we've talked about the 6 different types of prompts, I want to show you what is known as the prompting hierarchy. So prompts exist on a continuum, or in this case, as you can see, a pyramid. So at the very, very top of the pyramid, we have independent, which means that the learner is engaging in the skill without any prompting. And as you can see, that as you move down the pyramid, the prompts get more intrusive. And what I mean by intrusive is the amount of assistance that is required to complete the skill. So as you can see at the very top, there's independent, and then moving on, it goes to visual, and then verbal, and then gestural, and then modeling, and then partial physical, and then full physical. So as I said before, full physical is the most intrusive prompt, and the least intrusive prompt is near the top, which is visual prompt. So as you can see on the sides of the pyramid, there is least to most prompting, and then most to least prompting. So we will talk about that in the next slide. So now let's talk about how to prompt using the least to most prompting method. So using the least to most prompting method involves progressing through the prompt hierarchy from the least intrusive prompt to the most intrusive prompt necessary to ensure the learner performs the skill correctly. So if the learner does not perform the skill correctly when a lesser intrusive prompt is given, the person teaching should immediately use a more intrusive prompt. So to give an example, this is an example of using the least to most prompting method to teach a learner how to eat yogurt with a spoon. So step one would be placing a bowl of yogurt and a spoon in front of the learner and waiting to see if they do it independently. So if they do not do it independently, then you would immediately proceed to step two, which would be using a gestural prompt, pointing to the spoon. So if pointing to the spoon doesn't work, then what you would do is move to step three, which is to use a model prompt and modeling what the learner should do with the spoon. So if the model prompt does not work, then you would move to step four, which is to use a partial physical prompt, which involves guiding the learner's hand to use the spoon with their forearm or elbow. And if the partial physical prompt does not work, then you would move to step five, which would be to use a full physical prompt, which would be using hand-over-hand guidance to fully assist the learner in using the spoon to eat their yogurt. Also, I just want to throw this out here. Every learner is different, so as you can see in my example, there were 5 steps going from independent to gestural to model to partial physical to full physical. That is not necessarily going to be the same for every learner. Like some learners you would start with independent, but then you move on to maybe a model, and then if the model's not working, you can move to like a full physical. So yeah, just remember to understand that every learner is different, and therefore using the least to most prompting method will not be the same for every learner. Another prompting method is called most to least prompting. So most to least prompting involves progressing through the prompt hierarchy from the most intrusive prompt to the least intrusive prompt necessary to ensure the learner performs the skill correctly. And once the learner performs the skill correctly with the most intrusive prompts, the person teaching should immediately use the next less intrusive prompt. So here's an example of using most to least prompting to teach a learner how to eat yogurt with their spoon. So step one would be to use the full physical prompt, which would be using your hand-over-hand guidance to fully assist the learner in using the spoon to eat their yogurt. So once they can eat their yogurt with a spoon using a full physical prompt, then you would move to step two, which would be using a partial physical prompt, which involves guiding the learner's hand to use the spoon with their forearm or elbow. And once they start eating their yogurt with their spoon correctly with a partial physical prompt, then you would move to step three, which would be using a model prompt, which would involve modeling what the learner should do with their spoon. And once they eat with their spoon correctly using the model prompt, then you would move to step four, which would be independent, which would be placing a bowl of yogurt and a spoon in front of the learner and letting them do it on their own. So this marks the end of our training video on prompts. I hope you found this video to be informative and useful, and please reach out to your behavior analyst or clinician if you have any additional questions regarding prompts. Thanks!